just so you know,
But,
you could acknowledge.
I'm sure everyone
a live
from
audience.
home is dialed in.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's only 2 in the morning.
That's true. What else could you be doing?
Yeah.
Better than any dream you could have.
Okay, so you want me to do the whole overview, Ron? Why did I think that I was going to hand this over to you?
I mean,
I can totally do it. It's fine. I just wanted to. I want to make sure I'm doing what you guys want me to do.
yeah, if that works for you.
That's
and
fine.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a huge audience. I don't think you need to
Yeah.
get into much detail.
Yeah. Sort of. We're okay. Oh, good. It's only 5 after. Do we want to wait for our last panelist?
I don't know
Should we
what
get going?
their.
It's 2:05. Peter Odehengo.
Yeah,
You know him?
I don't.
I'm gonna have them introduce themselves as opposed to me.
Yeah.
It's better.
Probably can.
Well, let's get started, and then I'll
yeah.
just pop in. Yeah. Good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me okay? Good? Yeah? Wonderful. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're waiting for one additional panelist, but he might be wandering the wilderness of the COP, lost in the wild, so hopefully he will be joining us here shortly. Thank you for joining us today. I know there's a lot of demands for time and attention at the COP. We appreciate your participation here today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Alexia Kelly. I'm the managing director of a program called the Carbon Policy and Markets Initiative at the High Tide Foundation, which is a private family office philanthropic organization dedicated to climate change. And we focus on really leveraging carbon markets in particular to deliver finance to the global south and to the collective objectives related to climate change. I also have the pleasure of serving as the co-chair of the Global Climate Action Partnership Steering Committee. We established the Global Climate Action Partnership almost 15 years ago now, about 13 years, to provide a place for developing country governments and practitioners to really set their own agenda and have a shared conversation. So we're joined by a group of folks who are practicing and really doing this work on the ground, and they're here to share their experiences and perspectives with you. And thanks to our online audience as well, those who've joined remotely. I might just ask our participants to take a minute to introduce themselves. I'll provide a short overview of the Global Climate Action Partnership, and then we'll have a discussion about who's doing what where and what we're learning in the early stages of getting ready to leverage carbon markets to mobilize climate finance for the global south.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Sandra Guzman. I'm the General Director of the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am Rocío Garcia from Peru, but I work for UNEP for the UN RED Plus initiative. So, and I am the land sector climate finance specialist for the LAC region.
Hello, everybody. It's really, great to be part of this distinguished panelists. My name is Dastan. I came from Kyrgyzstan. Currently, I'm a SUVF Climate Diplomacy Fellow, as well as just recently was Director of Climate Finance Center of Kyrgyzstan. That's the main government body with dealing in terms of climate finance and climate policy agenda back to my country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The slides are not advancing, so I'll just start providing the overview for you here while we get that sorted out. As I mentioned earlier, we started the Global Climate Action Partnership actually when I was at the State Department in the Office of Global Climate Change there, really in order to provide developing countries a place that they owned to have the conversations that they wanted to have about the things that mattered to them. So really thinking strategically about how do we integrate low emissions development priorities alongside economic development and economic growth objectives. Thank you. So the Global Climate Action Partnership, it used to be called the Low Emissions Development Strategies Global Partnership, has really evolved, but its core premise is the same, which is that it is this peer-to-peer exchange and platform for our friends in the developing in emerging markets to really do the work that they need to do to deliver on their core objectives. And so we work through a variety of pretty unusual mechanisms in the international development space, which is We have 4 regional platforms, and the regional platforms are all governed and supported by local institutions. And the regional platforms set their own priorities around the issues that they're interested in focusing on. So those issues have ranged from as general as mini grids and electrification to the super specific issues around bioenergy and integration of those types of economic activities. Those, we call them our communities of practice. And so it's typically groups of government officials who come from relevant government bodies that are trying to figure out particular issues. We have concentrated technical work that happens, exchanges, and then we get everyone together every couple of years to do global exchange. So the idea is that we have this perpetual cycle of learning and exchange and collaboration that happens within regions and also happens as an international community so that we can make sure that the amazing things that our friends in Mexico are doing, our friends in Kazakhstan can learn from, and our friends in Ghana can also learn from. And folks can really start to build and accelerate and amplify best practices in the low emissions development economy space. So we focus on energy, we focus on transport, we focus on AFALU or land use issues, and we focus on climate finance mobilization because, of course, if you can't pay for the things that we need to do, they're much less likely to happen. So it's been a long road, and we've gotten a lot done. Today, the GCAP boasts more than 1,900 practitioners that have been trained in clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate. We have more than 60 institutions that have improved their capacity to address these key issues around clean energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate topics around the world. We've mobilized $1.3 million from non-State Department sponsors for key GCAP activities, and the US State Department and the US government has been a core funder of the work for many, many years since the very beginning. We have 2 new communities of practice that we launched in 2023 to support and connect stakeholders across Africa on the issues of rice methane and across Latin America on the issue of methane abatement more broadly. We'll hear more about that today. And we've supported the development and implementation of more than 13 different policies and measures, which are either in progress or completed. Of course, throughout the entire history of the work that we've done together, finance has been a recurring theme, and it cross-cuts everything, right? There's nothing we do in this world that doesn't cost money. And so thinking through how we mobilize those resources is incredibly important. And we all know that the finance from the global north is not flowing nearly fast enough or at the scales that are required, both to enable developing countries to grow their economies equitably, but also to make sure that we are adapting and responding and integrating climate resilience into the work that we do globally. So we do a lot of work on looking at enabling frameworks for investment along with many of our partners. And that focuses on everything from really understanding how to catalyze private sector investment, carbon markets. We're going to talk about carbon markets today. They are an incredibly powerful tool for mobilizing private investment into a wide range of mitigation activities globally, particularly when they're well designed and structured. We also do work looking at project development and learning, really responding to members' needs and requests and making sure that if we have a person who's been asked by their government in a ministry to do a specific task, we can match them with the best expertise from across the network and make sure that they're supported in delivering on those objectives. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our panel here. All of them are doing incredibly interesting and exciting work. And we're very excited to hear first from Dastan from the the Council on Sustainable Development and Climate Change of the Parliament of Kyrgyzstan. So please, Mr. Dastan, join us, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. Oh. As soon as they get his presentation up.
While presentation is coming, first of all, dear colleagues, it's great honor to be part of this distinguished panelists, and thank you very much for inviting us to share our humble experience on this area, because I must admit that Kyrgyzstan is still in early stages. But still, it's a huge opportunity to learn from our colleagues as well as from institutions. And hopefully that our cooperation will last, and ultimately Kyrgyzstan also will at one point succeed on carbon market. As already mentioned, carbon market is one of the greatest tools to reach our climate objectives and ambitions. And in terms of climate agenda, I wanted to start with a bit background on Kyrgyzstan policy and then switch to which kind of opportunities are there. First of all, is presentation coming? So, first of all, Kyrgyzstan located in Central Asia, a little bit far away from region, and we mainly collaborate with Central Asian countries as well as, of course, other international markets. Recently, in 2021, Kyrgyzstan updated its NDC, and according to our updated NDC, we aim to reduce GHG emission by 16% with our own resources, as well as up to 44% with the international support. That's a strategic so-called midterm agenda till 2030. At the same time, Kyrgyzstan, during the COP26, announced that Kyrgyzstan is aimed to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. This is a long-term vision. Based on it, we are now doing our best to develop our NDC action plan, as well as develop our national adaptation plan and technology assessment. Those are main policy documents which based on it, Kyrgyzstan will try to reach our climate objectives. In terms of NDC objectives, as I mentioned, that 44% is quite ambitious, and to reach that level of, here we are. And in order to reach that goal, next slide, please. In order, that's NDC, that's the main objectives. You can see that in order to reach that, our ambitious goal to reduce up to 44%, currently preliminary estimations require that up to 10 billion USD is required. Apart it, around 37% is considered as our own resources. Remaining 63% is needed for international support. And of course, we recognize that carbon market is one of the best tools to attract particularly private sector finance, because as we know that Kyrgyzstan is emitted 0.03% if you compare in global level. It means that Kyrgyzstan emit nothing, but at the same time we need more adaptation. But unfortunately, carbon market will play more on mitigation side. But still, 10 million USD is huge amount of money which required. But at the same time, Kyrgyzstan announced that as a country, small landlocked mountainous country, ready to implement that kind of big structural reforms, ambitious structural reforms, if we will have, support from our partners. As I indicated, it's 44. And the interesting thing is that our aim is perfectly fit with global Paris Agreement aim. As we all know, that Paris Agreement aim to reduce GHG emission globally by 2030, 44%, as well as to reach net zero by 2050. Our goal is, match perfectly with Paris Agreement global goal, and hopefully we will reach it with the support of our international. Just to look at quickly which kind of measures are required. You can see that mitigation side is required more than 7 billion USD. It's in different areas: energy, industrial processes, agriculture, forestry, waste management. And in my particular case, in terms of carbon marketing, I will touch one piloting area. It's related to agriculture. In terms of adaptation side, it's relatively small, because adaptation side only include until 2025. That's why total number is close to 3 billion. And by the middle of next year, we will develop our NAP, and that NAP document will have more broader context, and then we will have ultimate financing resources which we needed throughout coming 10 years. So, turning to carbon market opportunities, as I told that Kyrgyzstan currently is in early stages. We are now exploring, trying to find which way is suitable to our country. And one of the examples which we develop currently together with GIZ, it's a pilot project. It's related to agriculture sector. You can see that agriculture contributes around 20% of country's GDP, as well as around 30% of national labor force work on agriculture sector. And one of the highest emitter of GHG emission in our country, also in agriculture sector, and that sector is quite vulnerable to the consequence of climate change. And together with GIZ, we conducted preliminary assessment to see which kind of opportunities are there. And then we end up with land use sector in agriculture area. After having, exploring different options, 6.2 to 6.4, and then VCM, we suggested to have voluntary carbon market, VCM. And of course, in order to expand this area and this project, at the same time, we know that this carbon market will contribute in our NDC target as well, as already mentioned, and hopefully we will try to bring more private sector, not only national, maybe international as well, through this process. And currently, preliminary estimation requires around 530 USD to scale up this project, and then we hopefully the transaction cost will be around 40,000 USD, and ultimately, on average, this proposed project will generate around 1.2 million annually, as well as around 24 million over the project lifetime. Just recently, just a couple of hours ago, I met with another organization from Kyrgyzstan. It's called Carbonek. Those guys are also trying to develop its own carbon market proposals and try to scale up. They also told me that this in piloting phase, if any interest on develop whether this project further or carbonate project, of course, welcome always, and then we will have our detailed discussion on those results. Ultimately, what is next? What requires to scale up this process? Of course, feasibility study. Then we, of course, need to identify potential donor who is interested in to develop this area to further. And overall, to creating that legal institutional environment to develop this project is required, of course, and to find suitable implementing partner among probably with NGOs in order to scale up this project and then to gain knowledge throughout this process. Of course, we all know that challenges is quite big, particularly from Kyrgyzstan point of view, because we are all only on early stages, and we know that it's required a lot of steps, and each step will require a lot of additional activities as well. And hopefully, by next year, when we will meet again in COP29, hopefully Kyrgyzstan will show our own results, successful result, and then try to share with our respective member countries. That's overall it. Main goal is to fulfill objective NDC, and then this NDC is our main political document to attract more climate finance to Kyrgyzstan. Thank you very much. If any other question, we will discuss it further in our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dastan. Yeah, please feel free to sit down. So exciting to start to see these markets take root in new places. Turn on the mic. Definitely agree that there is substantial amount of work that goes into mapping and identifying opportunities to leverage carbon finance and actually bring those to market as they're prepared. Rocio Garcia Naranjo is the Land Use and Forest Finance Specialist for Latin America and the Caribbean at the UN RED program and has worked on carbon markets for many, many years, including with me in the Article 6 negotiations. Tell us a little bit about what kind of capacity building you see as really being necessary to enable developing countries to more efficiently and effectively tap into markets that work for them, for their own objectives.
So thank you, Alexia. Yes, we know each other for years now. So the capacities are different from when you are thinking about establishing a market on your own country or participating in existing markets, right? So I will focus my intervention in the second kind of capacities for those, because developing countries, or most of the developing countries, are far from having the size or the strength or the political will even to implement a market. I mean, Mexico is the example of a huge country struggling in the way of implementing a carbon market. We see Brazil now, which is a second monster in the region, trying to implement one, or at least developing the legislation for doing it, and also like having problems or not problems, but maybe challenges to implement this. So I will focus on the second one, and is how can we participate, or what are the capacities needed for participating efficiently in the market. So the first one, it is just to educate people and the climate community on what a market is. So this is a different era in which it should not be focused anymore on CDM, which is the way that many of our experts know it and understand the market, but to show them that we are in a different situation, not only because we have Article 6, but because we also have a voluntary market that is increasing, that is demanding more integrity in terms of social and environmental integrity. And in addition, because we all now have national commitments that will limit, if we are talking about compliance market and selling our ITMOs, we can call them more Article 6 results, we will sell them, so it will jeopardize the successful implementation of our NDCs. So this is a completely different context, which needs to be fully understood in the countries to start discussing the next step for efficiently participating in a carbon market. So we need to strengthen those capacities, so in the first place. In the second round of capacities will be to develop the national systems to monitor the implementation of these projects or programs that will produce the credits or offsets to be sold in the different markets. Once again, under the CDM, there was slightly, or actually very different systems that were needed. We actually didn't need huge systems or monitoring systems. They were centralized somehow under the ITL, and the countries were not following up on this project. So most of the time they were informed, but this was not a prerequisite. So now, with Article 6, we need authorization. This is actually what is being discussed now in the rooms. But if integrity goes in the same direction, probably the credits that are being produced for the voluntary carbon market might also need some sort of authorization eventually, and it's being discussed also with standards. So you need way more involved government. I don't know how long I have, just because I think I'm talking and talking. Sorry. So we need. Thank you, sorry. So we need this kind of involvement for the government, not only to follow up on these projects, but to understand them, to monitor the evolution, and to have grievance mechanisms in place, and different kind of regulations to let this production of credits flow. So this is challenging because we don't have these capacities, because, as I mentioned, the market has considerably changed in the last years. So governments need to produce all these regulations. This is even more difficult when we are talking about the forest sector, I mean, in which I work nowadays, and I will not enter into details, but it is even more difficult, because if we are talking about a nesting approach that embeds the small projects into a more jurisdictional approach, then you have to have a system that monitors both. Both needs to use the same baselines and the same criteria and the same uncertainty and leakage. So there are more aspects and technical aspects that needs to be decided at the national level and monitored. So we do need to strengthen the capacities within the government to survive in this new scheme. And then a third capacities that we need to develop inside is the capacities to design and implement projects or programs. Even though we do, many of at least the LAC countries that we actively participate in the CDM era, we do have these capacities to design and implement. But once again, the conditions have considerably changed in the last year. So we are being demanded justly to increase integrity in terms of social and environmental terms. And this is difficult to implement inside because there is no one single understanding of what permanence is on what risk of leakage is. We are, again, discussing this for removals and for the methodologies under Article 6. So when you try to trickle down this into the countries, they all understand it differently because they all face different challenges. So these capacities to design and implement projects in this changing context where the understanding is not a common, there is no common understanding, there is a challenge. So each country, including the project developers, needs to have a common understanding, at least for the country. And finally, we need to strengthen the capacities and their understanding from various stakeholders so they can engage meaningfully in monitoring projects, in developing, in being part of the communities that are lending their areas, for example, for a project to be developed. So we have different sets of capacities to be strengthened.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. We have challenges around figuring out the regulatory and issuance pathways, project identification and development, really thinking about what the institutional arrangements within the government need to be in order to make sure that we can issue Paris-compliant units moving forward. And then, of course, how do you build systems that enable and really bring in the local communities to make sure that they are fully free, prior, and informed consent is implemented across the board. We want to make sure we have some time for discussion and questions. So, Sandra, please tell us a little bit about your perspective, both on carbon markets and other exciting green financing instruments that you see being implemented to help it deliver on our NDCs.
Thank you so much, Alexa, and thanks a lot for the invitation to participate in this conversation. I would like to start picking up on something that Rocio was telling about the different capacities that developing countries have. But I would say that it's not only the capacities, but also the needs. Every single country needs something different. And one of the main discussions that we are having, at least we are recognizing in developing countries, that we need to be able to assess those needs. For instance, how we are going to implement the NDCs, how we are going to implement the the public policy instruments that we have if we do not assess what are our needs, what we have and what we need. And this is take me to what we have been discussing with different countries, and we have been pushing for many, many years, is the necessity to create national strategies on climate finance and carbon markets, or climate finance and innovative mechanisms, to be able to assess how much do we actually have at the national level. So what is what we can do with our own resources, and what do we need from international cooperation to help us, and what else is beyond that. And I think this exercise took us forever, I have to say, because at the beginning it was more about, okay, we need a lot of money from international cooperation, and we do. It's not that we don't. We definitely do. But it's more about how we are going to start transforming the processes at the national level. So I will give you the example. I'm from Mexico, and I had the opportunity to participate very actively in the design of the emission trading system in Mexico. I was the climate change director in the environmental ministry at that point. And for us, it was very important to recognize that the carbon system is, this emission trading system was part of a package. We cannot solve the climate crisis with these systems, and I would like to emphasize that hundreds of times, no? Because it's part of the discussion, it's part of the package, but it's because it's the type of instruments that we need to decarbonize very carbon-intensive industries such as steel, cement, oil, and others. For us, was really important to recognize that we have two main companies, the oil company and the power generation company, are public companies. And when you talk about trading those emissions with them, it's like, well, first of all, tell me what is a carbon trading system, because I don't know what is that, how it's gonna work, and to what extent we're gonna be able to trade, because we're gonna be trading among ourselves, no? And how we are going to design these processes. So one of the things that we decided to do, first of all, there was a huge process of understanding which sectors can be part of the system, which sectors are going to be able, no, to participate, because you also have the different sizes. No? The different countries have different sizes of sectors, and if you establish these type of systems in certain countries with certain, like small sectors, then you are, instead of providing an incentive, you are putting a huge burden in sectors. No? So the second point, it was, let's measure our capacities, not only in terms of the reduction at the institutional level, but also in the environmental ministry, we didn't have enough people to actually design. So we had to call for the international cooperation to help us to design. Then we decided to establish a pilot program. No? And we managed to include this process in the climate change law. And this is for me one of the critical points, because you can have these systems that are voluntary, but if you have voluntary systems, you will have voluntary participation. And that doesn't change the behavior. I disagree that voluntary approaches change the behavior. They don't change the behavior. They will at a certain point, probably. So I do believe that regulation is very important, and what we did in Mexico was including this in the law to be able to really like oversee and ensure that that happened. And obviously the pilot process was an opportunity to check to what extent the sectors were ready. But as Rocio was saying, now that this year was the year that the system started to operate fully, and we are still not yet there, because we don't have the capacities not only to be able to measure the reduction, to be able to do the trading, but to be able to really transparently report what is happening. No? And this is a matter of of capacities, definitely. But I would say that it is important that all developing countries really have comprehensive packages of measures. We do believe that, for instance, we have to work a lot in fiscal reforms to decouple our economies. A lot of our economies rely on fossil fuels to generate revenues. Like the last year we assessed, like, if you put together all the major emitters in Latin America, which contribute more or less with 8% of emissions at the global level, they receive 15 times more income from carbon-intensive activities than from climate finance. No? And of course, the incentive to pollute is there. No? So it's important to have fiscal reforms, to change the type of incentives that we are generating, and include more, not only trading systems, but also carbon taxes. But carbon taxes that can collect that money and invest in alternatives. Because in Mexico, again, we have a carbon tax. But what we are collecting from that carbon tax is not reinvested in technology, in clean technology or others. It's just going straight to the fiscal, to the bag of the finance ministry. No? Actually, Colombia is the only country that is trying to reinvest the carbon tax, what is collected. So definitely, I would like to finish saying that it's very important, and of course, you have the role of the public budget. And of course, we have a very limited fiscal space, not only because countries are paying for a lot of the debt, but it's also a matter of priorities. As Rocio was saying, it's also a willingness. No? And unfortunately, our countries are not investing in climate action, are not investing in renewable energy. A lot of the investments in renewable energy are coming from the private sector. But our countries, for instance, Mexico invests, out of the full budget, 11% is dedicated fully to production of oil. No? It's kind of like this perverse incentive. But anyway, I would like to conclude saying that it's very, very important to have packages, these national strategies on climate finance and innovative mechanisms, to be able to assess what sector needs what. We cannot tackle like the whole problem with just one bullet, but it's really important to have the different cycles and assess, no, what is important, because adaptation, we cannot necessarily tackle adaptation straight with a carbon market, but rather what type of mechanisms we are going to create to actively, compensate in nature and what really values, which is life. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those very insightful comments. And I think this whole, it's a balancing act, right? Because right now we have a lot of public subsidies that are going into making fossil fuels less expensive. And we have an economic system that does not value all of the externalities that this economic system is creating. And so thinking through ways to level the playing field, either by implementing a carbon tax on the one hand or removing fossil fuel subsidies on the other hand, you can accomplish the same end. But it's always a complicated balancing act. So thank you so much for sharing those examples. I actually, in our last few minutes, I have some questions for you, but I want to offer the folks in the room an opportunity to ask any questions about anything you've heard. Did anything strike your fancy as particularly surprising or interesting? Things you'd like to hear a little more about? How many of you are from a country that's considering carbon pricing right now or has a carbon price in place? Wonderful. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Hi. Okay, there we are. Hi. I'm Ceci. I'm here with a delegation of Paraguay and Duke University. I've been following the Article 6 negotiations closely, and I'm just curious to hear what you all hope comes of those negotiations by the end of COP, and what do you think is realistically going to come by the end of COP? Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know what is coming. So yeah, that is the most honest answer that I can give you. So yesterday we were until 11 negotiating 6.2. And 6.2, the fact is that it's already operational. So we have been operating for 1 year. We have already sort of transactions between Ghana and Switzerland, so it is being implemented. So we need some procedures to take place in order to enhance the transparency process. So we need to see how is this going to be reported, how the authorizations are going to take place. So there are some housekeeping aspects that needs to be established and agreed. But the mechanism already works. So this is something good. 6.4 is going to take somehow more time. From what we are hearing in the room, there are two pending discussions that are two documents that are coming from the supervisory body from Article 6, one related to mitigation methodologies, and then the other one related to removals. Some said that methodologies, if we would approve methodologies, this could trigger some already the start of 6.4. And because this is something that some people believe, which I don't know if I believe, but this would mean some other people do not want to approve removals because they need methodology, so they want the package, right? So because removals is very important for most countries working at least with RED Plus that have forests, but with other new technologies that remove carbon from the atmosphere based on technology, not in nature. So these are hand in hand, and without the approval of these two, this will not be operative, most likely. So I think that this is, well, from my point of view, there are still a lot of things to be decided within these two documents that can be potentially challenging for a lot of developing countries. I mean, this is a battle now between being practical and being integral, right? I mean, it is really tricky to come into the middle of these two, and we need both to succeed, right? To actually be in line with the Paris Agreement goal. And this subtle balance, I am not sure if we are going to achieve it in the technical arena, but most probably in the political one. But this is my particular point of view. But this is what I would have to say for Article 6 and the outcomes here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have another question in the back. Do any of the other panelists want to answer the question on Article 6?
Unfortunately, I'm following NCQG and all the finance package, which are a lot. So that's why I haven't been following Article 6 these days.
My name is Dr. Eugene Itua. I want to just pick your phrase. You talked about housekeeping. As part of the in-country housekeeping, would you recommend, okay, what kind of policy framework would you recommend for operationalizing the carbon price that she talked about, as well as the voluntary carbon market? How would they work together and ensure that one feeds the other in helping the country to meet its target?
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much. I think one of the critical elements, or where I could start, and at least in my experience back in Mexico, the very first point is identify, like, characterize your sectors, no? Like, what type of policies do you have? For instance, in the very first NDC, we didn't include many of these instruments because it was not a good characterization of the sectors. But with the time we have been able, well, we have a good inventory and all this, but I think it's about how to mainstream climate change in the different sectors to understand which are your major emitters, what type of measures you can implement in each sector, no? Because again, every sector will behave differently. For instance, the carbon tax that we have only applies to oil, and actually didn't include even gas, for instance, no? Because it was very targeted. And I think this is part of, okay, it's important to identify what are your sectors, what are your opportunities to develop, and then pick, no? For instance, in the emission trading system, at the beginning, it was also important to select specific sectors because it was not possible to include all of them, because measuring the reductions, the removals, like all, it was very difficult. So it was the very first part, it was for power generation, it was for steel, for cement, for paper, but others stayed away, no, because it was very difficult to measure. So my suggestion in this case is to, that's why NDCs are an important kind of like mechanism, but you have to design NDCs not only in the environmental like ministry, but you have to design those NDCs in collaboration with all the ministries, like transport ministry, energy ministry, like really having a comprehensive approach about like who is participating in the design of the NDC, what type of mechanisms you can implement, and to what extent those mechanisms are applicable or not to that specific sector. And once you have like the characterization of your sector and the needs that you have in each sector in terms of reduction, then you can decide which mechanism is better or not. Because there are sectors that, for instance, might not be part of the carbon sector, I mean carbon tax, or even the ETS, probably you just need full grants on that, no? Like full other type of blended finance or others. So I think it's important to have your characterization, your NDCs, and then try to make a costing analysis about the type of interventions that you need. And I just wanted to emphasize this. I had the opportunity to participate with the Standing Committee on Finance in the needs report that was published a few years ago. And for my surprise, many developing countries have been trying to estimate the cost of mitigation and adaptation. And costing is one of the biggest challenges because we don't know how much do we need. So this is also part of the challenge. No, how is your sector behaving? What type of interventions do you need, and how much do you need to do those interventions? But I think it's a pathway that you can kind of follow, and actually something that we are working like precisely to support in those type of assessments, in what type of instruments is better, because as I said, not all the mechanisms are going to be helpful for all of the sectors. No?
Excellent, thank you. Dustin, as someone who's recently started to explore these issues,
just
please.
quick example, what you're saying, that in terms of country context is very important. Even though that in Kyrgyzstan, energy and transportation is the biggest emitter, but we decided to piloting on pasture land in terms of, I mean, political things are there as well. Because, I mean, still Kyrgyzstan is based on oil. but we cannot intervene drastically on that area. That's why we start to step with agriculture area, and then of course we will, after successful piloting, we can expand it in other sectors as well. We hope that. And another thing is that currently Kyrgyzstan is working on developing environment code. And what one of the takeaways from today's discussion is certainly carbon market should be part of that developing environment code, I guess, and then follow up that successful legal framework. We will work on expanding our activities. Thank you.
Dastan, while you have the mic, maybe I could ask you to reflect a little bit on some of the capacity building that you've received so far. Obviously, you guys partnered with, I think, GIZ to do your initial feasibility assessment. I'm just curious, what types of capacity building do you think would be most useful coming from the international community to support the development of these markets?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much. That I'm not talking about only myself. I'm talking about broader context of my country, of course, right? Public offices, private sector. To be honest, that carbon market, that word is there, but nothing specific over there. In that sense, that any support, starting from beginning, for majority or for broader public office or private sector members, it should be starting from the beginning, to be honest, and then, of course, follow up step by step when it's needed. In terms of, there was project development, right, and a lot of elements, which I showed that 16 or 17 elements, and each of those elements requires, different type of approach, different type of trainings, and I hope that we will be able to collaborate together and to train at least in basic things, and remaining we can develop by ourselves. But all the capacity building needs is required, to be honest, on that sense. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Other thoughts on what type of capacity building support? You obviously do a lot of that, I assume.
Well, no, I have already talked about capacity building, but I forgot while I have been hearing this, one piece of capacity building that is completely needed in our countries, and that is actually not being carried out by, not much, just to be fair. It is the capacity to the financial sector system, because we are developing projects, many of them with new technologies, because that is precisely the idea of piloting some initiatives so we can eventually scale up our ambition and include it in our NDCs, for example. And we are not getting the financial support that we need from the financial sector. We are not even having concessional loans, so they want to increase the risk, a premium risk, because of new technologies, because the market is not developed, because there are the knowledge in the financial institution to understand what is being done. So these capacities are also needed. And where the financial mechanism is not in place, there is no equity possibly, or there is no debt under concessional or non-concessional terms, there are no the capacities to establish new financial mechanisms that can help us to implement these new ideas. And this is a piece of capacity that we are all lacking.
Thank you so much. No, I just wanted to emphasize something that I think what we need also is it's a periodic capacity building. Because sometimes you have these workshops, like I'm gonna teach you how the carbon trade works, and then once, and then you leave, and then that is dead. No, exactly. You need a systematic process, because these conversations are evolving all the time. All the methodologies, the transparency processes. It's an evolving process, and of course, at the governmental level, you have changes, right? Like you have teams, they change, and then you have to start all over again. But also, I would like to emphasize that, and this is a positive critique to the cooperation, sometimes they bring their technicians, no? Like I'm not gonna mention names, but they bring their technicians, and they are the experts, no? And they are sitting in our ministries, and they said, I'm the expert on this, I'm the expert on that. But it's like, how you transfer those knowledge to the technical people that remains in the ministries, because in my experience, I had a lot of technical people sitting like there from other corporations, but when you try to embrace those like capacities in the team, it's not like a constant transfer, no? Like, and I think it's important. If you want to kind of strengthening the capacities, it's something that has to be periodic, and you have to ensure that all those capacities, all that knowledge is transferred properly, adequately, and in a long-term lasting in our teams. No?
Absolutely. In the United States, we have a saying that is, if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. If you teach him to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. So really thinking about how do you embed and leave that capacity behind in a meaningful way. We only have a couple more minutes. We could take one more question, or I have a closing question for the panel if there's.
Thank you very much. My name is David from Uganda, Eastern Africa, and I'm impressed about the submissions made here, especially around Article 6. I could say for most of the countries in East Africa, development of national regulations and frameworks for Article 6 and carbon markets underway. However, I'm wondering, and I would also like to know from the panelists, how are these emission trading systems, as well as the carbon pricing mechanisms, would link with Article 6.2, for example? Do you see Article 6 playing a role in this kind of cooperation, but also, more importantly, seeing that some of the big countries have not indicated that they will use Article 6 credits? How do you see this panning out? Because as developing countries are developing regulations and developing projects to generate these credits, it's imperative that there is sufficient demand to offtake these credits. So do you see Article 6.2 or Article 6 in general playing a role in the carbon pricing systems?
Great question.
You want to start? You have an answer. Also. So I will come back to the capacities and then I will answer, because now I'm speaking on sort of behalf of UNEP. We have received 120 requests from countries on capacity building for understanding the negotiations on Article 6. So as you might know now, probably, Peru and Mexico, there are others, because the technical level of these discussions is outrageous. So, I mean, you really need to know and understand in each of the words, and they come with history. So you really need to know the process for years to understand the way we have arrived here to this discussion, to that word, even cooperative approaches, right? Even that name comes with a history that is 5 years back when we were discussing for the framework of various approaches. It was the name before this, the framework for the FBA, NMA, and NMM, right? So it's awful. So actually, the first set of capacities, which is what your question brought me to this, is just to make, like to spread the knowledge of what we are really discussing here. So why are we discussing what an ITMO is, or what is the definition of cooperative approaches? It's fair enough. What is a cooperative approach? We need a definition, but for that we also need capacity building. So just to close the issue of capacity building there, I'm sorry, but that is true. Because countries they don't have the capacities to negotiate as equals if they don't understand the basic concepts or the basic definitions that we have them somehow in our minds because of history, but they are not written anywhere. So just to close with this, as I was mentioning, this support for new technologies is part of the positive round of ambitions that Article 6 can bring to our life if it would work. So I don't want to be critical, but I am going to be critical. In the case of Peru, we have two ideas of ITMOS. One is improve cookstoff that is already being implemented by the country. So there is nothing new there. And the other one is to improve practices of rice cosecha, like production, harvesting. But the country doesn't want more rice because we don't have enough water. Right? So these are the two great ideas of ITMOS that the international cooperation is bringing to the country, because they are practicing them in other places and they are great, I mean, as ideas. But as Sandra was mentioning, the needs are different. So you can bring a good idea from other country and it should not be, or it might not be successful in the second country, right? So when we are thinking about this positive cycle of ambition, this is what the Article 6 can offer, provided it is developed in the proper way in each country. Because it can allow you to prove new technologies that eventually can become part of your NDC because you own the technology and you are able to scale it up to an amount, to a size that is relevant for the country. But in addition, you help other countries to increase their own ambition, which is also positive. So, and this, just to link it to come back to your question, should also allow to create the financial sources to deploy all this inside, that many of our countries, they don't have the capacity to do it, nor the resources. So there should be, there is the positive link of Article 6 into climate finance, into increased ambition for both parts in the transaction.
So we are, thank you for that answer. We are unfortunately out of time, so I'm gonna do a lightning round to close today. In one sentence, tell me what you are most hopeful for with respect to carbon markets in your country.
I think I already described in terms of for the COP29, we will able to share some kind of improvement in our journey. I know it's a long-term journey, a lot of challenges are there, and thank you very much for our distinguished panelists to share that experience, and hopefully by the time being, we will be successful and then try to share our own knowledges with our respective countries as well. Thank you.
Well, I think Article 6 it's going to play a role, and it's already playing a role, but has to be part of a package. And a package that has been transparent, has been accountable, and has to be regulated. You have to have regulations in place and an entities, strong entities that are able to oversee. Otherwise, we are going to continue the problem, and we are not going to solve it at all. So I hope that this process can help us to bring those institutional arrangements to help us.
So I was going to say something similar to Sandra, because I sometimes we put so much faith in carbon markets, but this is only one tool of the many that we need to deploy, right? So this just that. So the message is that I hope that we manage to get social and environmental integrity in these reductions that we are going to offer to the world, just to have a net zero.
Learning by doing, package of integrated solutions, and putting equity and justice at the heart of the outcomes of these markets. That's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to continuing the discussion.